Welcome to the Streets and People podcast, where we explore having more transport options that are less hassle to use. Hosted by Get Around Caboolture, we bring you 3 types of episodes. People and Projects share stories of change. Not Everyone Drives gives voice to non-drivers. Road Rules 360 unpacks road rules for people outside a car. Music by Grand Project. And let's make our Grand Project reimagining streets made for people. Today we're doing one of our People and Projects episodes. I am here in this studio with Anna Gurnhill from the Heart Foundation, Healthy Active by Design, which I'm super excited about because Anna, I'm a super fan. I think the work you do and everything that I see you involved in is totally amazing. I'm here on Gubbi Gubbi country in Queensland in Caboolture. I know you, Anna. I think we just started by the professional social media platform, and then I just see you everywhere that I am too. So it's wonderful to have you on the show. So perhaps you could say where you're calling from and what made you interested in this whole area.
Well, thanks so much, Wendy. Look, it is lovely to be here today and to speak with you and your listeners. I'm here on the land of the Ngunnawal people in the ACT. My background, I'm a cultural geographer, and the work that I have done throughout my career has always been about connections between people and places, and that's taken different forms and meant different things through my career. Initially, it was in the cultural heritage sector, but about 10 years ago, I pivoted into active transport as a keen cyclist, and that journey has led me into this position as advisor for active living for the Heart Foundation, which is a role that I stepped into about 2 years ago.
I actually don't know that much about Healthy Active by Design. I love the idea of it because I've lived in places which are healthy and active by design. So I know the principle from a lived experience, but I don't know the Heart Foundation's approach and why the Heart Foundation started it. I guess if you could step through the guidelines, that would be fantastic.
It's a great question, and it's a question that I love receiving is, what's the Heart Foundation doing in this space? What vested interest does the Heart Foundation have in urban planning and transport planning and the role of the built environments? I love getting that question because it's an opportunity to talk about the way that our local neighbourhoods and built environments shape our everyday lives. Research shows that people who live in walkable neighbourhoods are 1.5 times more likely to get their recommended physical activity levels each day. So that's those 30 minutes of going for a walk each day. Research also shows people who live in walkable environments are 2.8 times more likely to have a healthy cardiovascular risk profile. So from the Heart Foundation perspective, we know that physical activity is really important. We know that that looks like the equivalent of about 30 minutes of walking, moderate level exercise across most days of the week. And we know that postcodes are a key predictor of people's life expectancy and health. So we know that built environments play a key role in either supporting or hindering people from getting out and going for a walk each day, whether it be for recreational or for transport purposes.
Caboolture is on the outskirts of Brisbane. When I started this a few years ago, I thought, okay, well, I just want some buses. You know, the buses are really bad, so I want some buses. And then I thought, oh, the footpaths, they're pretty bad. And then I was like, the bike paths, they're pretty bad. And so I've just gone on and gone, oh, it's all pretty bad. And I've discovered that the outer suburbs, the peri-urban areas, are the most complex when it comes to transport need, because a lot of people commute, but a lot of people stay in the local areas, and people commute long distances, and it's low income and it's highly car dependent. A lot of people want to be able to have choice, but there's also a whole lot of people who are really against bike riding. So tell me how we can get healthy active by design in peri-urban areas where it's just hard.
We certainly talk about transport advantage and transport disadvantage, and we know that for people who live in outer urban areas, they are at a disadvantage for a whole range of lifestyle factors and opportunities. There's a huge time cost in living in outer areas. Just last year, the Heart Foundation actually worked with some researchers from the University of Canberra, and we were looking specifically at developing up a new module around walkability in less advantaged areas. And we worked very specifically with 3 local communities and councils in different areas across the the country, and one of those was in Western Sydney. And we've done a bit of work in Western Sydney in recent years, including advocacy submissions on a parliamentary inquiry into public transport in Western Sydney. And we know that there are all sorts of issues around equity and inclusiveness and accessibility. There's new research coming out that starts to talk about transport disadvantage and the relationship with the housing crisis as well, where often the cheaper housing is in the outer areas, but the transport costs involved in living in the outer areas, as well as the time costs, can negate the housing benefits of living in these areas. There's a lot of complexity and challenge and nuances within some of those outer areas. There are definitely things that can be done. There are definitely resources within Healthy Active by Design that can look at some of these challenges and help local councils and practitioners to consider some options moving forward. But also at this point in time, the housing crisis and housing affordability is such a hot political topic because it is just so pertinent to so many people across the country at the moment. We've got real opportunities to look at how and where we are designing and delivering housing as well, which has a huge role to play in that regard. Here in the ACT, the government is proposing missing middle housing reforms at the moment. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to happen in this sort of space across all states and territories. Next month, we're going to be releasing a new evidence paper called Designing for Density. And this is a paper together with others that a number of academic researchers are preparing for us at the moment. It's a paper that very much looks at what is the ideal density in neighbourhoods within the Australian context to support walkability, to support heart health, to support climate change, which also impacts on heart health, and to support a number of different beneficial outcomes. It's going to be a really great evidence paper looking at housing density and how do we prevent urban sprawl, how do we prevent any increase in car dependency. This paper itself doesn't look so much at this issue, but the public transport, that's another issue that you've identified in and of itself.
So missing middle housing, have you read Paved Paradise by Henry Grabar? I would recommend that book, it's great. So for our listener, if you're in Moreton Bay, it's in our local library, so you can just borrow it. It actually describes how difficult it is to get missing middle housing, especially if you have minimum parking requirements, because if you do a suburban low-density home, then you have lots of space for parking and all the rest, and it's cheap to do that. You can then go into the high-rise, and then you end up with multi-storey underground car parking. And that also financially works for the developer. But if you have parking for the missing middle, it stops being economically viable for the developer. And so parking is a major problem when it comes to missing middle housing. And I spent the first year of doing Get Around Caboolture going, why are they talking about parking? And then I realized that the more parking you have, the easier it is for everyone to get around by car. And then you end up with all these impacts, like everything is further away, street speeds are higher, it's more uncomfortable to walk. All these things. I'll be really interested to see how that paper emerges. Is that something that you had come across with the housing density and parking reform?
Certainly parking is something that comes up through these papers and through other resources on Healthy Active by Design, but it's not a body of work that we've looked at specifically to date.
What are the features of urban environment that is active by design?
On our Healthy Active by Design digital platform, we talk about 8 key design features, and these are public open spaces, community facilities, buildings, destinations, housing diversity, sense of place, movement networks, and access to fresh, healthy food. And we also talk about it at a macro level and a micro level. So the macro level are factors around mixed use land density, integrated transport, density and diversity, and having those local destinations within walking catchment to be able to easily access by foot or by bike or by public transport. And then the micro level features around footpath connectivity and width and maintenance and all the things that go into making footpaths great, the public open spaces, the tree canopy and shade cover, public amenity, seating, places to rest, lighting, issues of safety. So we tend to talk about it in those sorts of contexts across our 8 design features, and also the difference between the macro and micro level elements and the different responsibilities that different levels of government have in each of those areas as well.
So one there you mentioned, which was mixed use land development. I know it's used all the time. I come across it, but I actually don't know what it means. Do you?
To an extent, yes. I'm not going to pretend that I'm the guru in this space. It means reducing the segregation across different land uses so that you don't necessarily have a pocket in one area that is just residential and in another area that is your shopping complex. You want to mix these different destinations and land uses so that they are within walking, cycling, public transport distance for people, so that we don't have different amenities and public facilities and services that are spread out in different areas. You want it all to be integrated together so that people can easily get to the everyday services that they need to get to.
An example that I thought was really interesting of that was Chuck Marone from Strong Towns, and he talked about going to Italy and he saw a mother with a toddler at the back. Her place was a window in the house where she lived, and she would just make coffees and cakes for people who were just popping in for their coffee. And that was enough for her to be able to get a bit of extra cash. She didn't have to worry about paying for childcare. And so she was with them all the time. She lived there and she worked there. And I thought, this is really how we used to have it, the corner shop. That one just appeals to me because I think for our listener, if you're somebody who's really family focused, that just sounds like utopia.
Oh, look, it's a brilliant example. You know, it also speaks to other elements as well around that ground floor activation and passive surveillance, where if you've got those businesses at ground level on the street, it helps improve safety for everybody. You've got passive surveillance there as well. You've got eyes on the street, as Jane Jacobs would say, and that helps to build that sense of safety and community and helps to activate those places, which then draw more people out into the community and, yeah, really improves walkability and livability. And there are other countries. Japan's a really great example where there's a much greater sense of mixed land zoning that enables some of those small local businesses that you've just identified to just pop up there in a local residential neighbourhood. And it really brings the place to life. As you've said, it's great for the person who can work there from home and support their family, but it's also great for the local community as well. And I think that this is one of the really lovely things that did come out of some of our COVID lockdowns, where we were forced to live locally and to live within our local communities and to support some of those local businesses so close to home a lot more than what we perhaps ever have in the past. And I think some of our flexible working arrangements that we're continuing to see with people working from home a lot more and supporting some of those local businesses, I think there are some real opportunities there.
Healthy Active by Design was implemented or created in 2016 and was on the cover of Lancet, amazing medical journal. I think it was one of the series they had. So since that, we're now 2025, that's 9 years ago. Who has taken it up and what have been the outcomes? Is it just in Australia or is it across the globe? How has it developed?
So look, it was actually commenced back in 2008. So it's even older than the Lancet journal may have people think. So it was initially developed as a partnership between the Heart Foundation, the Planning Institute of Australia, and the Australian Local Government Association. At the time, it was known as Healthy Spaces, Healthy Places. Over time, the Heart Foundation have taken on full ownership and responsibility for Healthy Active by Design. We still maintain really strong working relationships with both the Planning Institute of Australia and the Australian Local Government Association. But look, we are really lucky that the program has such incredibly strong legacy, having been established since 2008. And since that time, we have also benefited significantly from a number of different academic researchers and other practitioners who've contributed and continue to contribute to the resources that are available through the platform. It would not be what it is without significant contributions from so many people, many of which have been made very generously in kind. So we are continuing to update the resources that are available on Healthy Active by Design. We're continuing to make sure that our publications, our evidence base and information about the health impact of various design features continue to always reflect best practice and the latest research and evidence. And this is where I mentioned that we're in the process at the moment of updating our Designing for Density evidence paper. We have just recently launched an updated evidence paper on active school travel. And in coming months, there are another 3 evidence papers that we'll be updating and or releasing as new papers. They're a collaboration with many, many people, drawing on some of the best minds in the business, so to speak. Some really great relationships with university institutions across the country and practitioners at all levels too.
Which cities or councils or countries have applied the principles and found an outcome?
It is an Australian resource. We're the National Heart Foundation of Australia, so we do develop these resources from that perspective, but they are certainly applicable internationally, and we do have followers from across the globe and people who use these resources from across the globe. Just this morning, I actually had a webinar with 8 master's students from Japan who wanted to hear more about our Healthy Active Aging supportive module. They're doing a body of work looking at improving health across the life course, particularly from the perspective of housing diversity and choice in Japan. And they wanted to know what they could learn from Healthy Active by Design. So that was a really brilliant opportunity to share some of what we do. Your question just now was which local councils are really implementing this. One example is in WA, all local councils have to have a public health plan in place by June 2026. Some councils already have their public health plan in place. The City of South Perth, as one example, have actually embedded Healthy Active by Design into their public health plan. And recently, this has enabled their public health reference group to use some of the Healthy Active by Design resources, and particularly some of our checklists, which are really practical guidance for local councils, to be able to use those checklists to undertake an audit or an assessment of the suburb of Karawara. They've taken the recommendations from that audit and already been able to not only put those recommendations into the work program of their city services colleagues, but they're actually now actioning some of those recommendations. Our role is very much to prepare the materials with our partners and academic researchers, and then to almost translate that research and evidence into practical guidance that local councils themselves can use. One way that we do measure the use of these resources is through case studies. And we have a page on the Healthy Active by Design website that has over 100 different case studies of different projects across the country that have used the resources. Each of those case studies sets out the health, economic, environmental, social benefits and impacts that that particular project has had. So we always love receiving case studies about any projects across the country, particularly those that have used Healthy Active by Design resources. But even if not, if it's a case study that touches on one of those 8 design features, we love being able to showcase and promote great work that's happening across the country. So I welcome your listeners, if you're working on a project somewhere across Australia and would like it showcased on Healthy Active by Design, please send it through, get in touch. Anytime that somebody reaches out and sort of says, can you point me in the right direction? How can we use these resources? Can you scan an eye over this? I will sit up and take notice, because here is someone that is being really proactive, wanting to create change, and they're the people that we want to support. We want to support everyone. We want to see change everywhere. But if people are already being really proactive about this, whether it's a local council or a developer or someone else, if they're reaching out to us, then we want to be able to honour that and support it.
Have you had much contact with developers? Have they been the main initiators, in fact, of this rather than
A
councils?
bit of a mix. I would say probably almost 50-50. And it is always really encouraging when we hear from a developer saying, I'm developing this new master plan. I'm in really early stages. We want to get this right. We want this to be a showcase project. What do we do? Are we on the right track here? What do you recommend? It makes my day when those emails pop up in my inbox.
And are any of those projects in Queensland?
Look, I think a really interesting one that you've got in Queensland at the moment is the Springfield community, which has recently won one of our Heart Foundation Catalyst grants. It's going to be designed to be a living showcase of a local walkable community. So I think that that one's a really interesting space to watch, and it's a health precinct in and of itself.
I feel like going on a day trip out to Springfield. Moreton Bay, it's a super high growth area. It would be amazing for us to learn from Springfield.
When you take your little field visit out to Springfield, let me know, and I would love to come and have a look as well.
We're at the point where I ask if somebody is in the community and they're flat chat. Usually I speak about my really great friend. She's a mum, she's at home, she doesn't work, she's completely flat chat with a couple of kids. She has no time, no money, lives in a really car dependent area. What's your sense of what she could do, or even perhaps somebody with a disability, perhaps they're wheelchair bound, also low income? What's something that either of those people could do to bring Healthy Active by Design to the attention? How do we make a change?
Thanks for asking this question, and this is a really great opportunity for me to plug some new resources that we've recently released specifically for community members. So to date, this conversation, we've very much been talking about the Healthy Active by Design resources that have been developed for industry practitioners and elected leaders and decision makers. But we do also have some really, really fantastic resources for the community. The very first thing that I would tell your friend to do is to jump onto our community walkability website, and we have a really cool interactive map that's been developed by Jake Coppinger, who's a software developer based in Sydney. You're nodding your head. You know Jake. He is brilliant. He combined enthusiasm for all things active transport with his software capability is incredible. So Jake has developed for us an interactive community map whereby a person can drop a pin on the map and select a 5, 10, 15 or 20-minute walking catchment. And the map will then populate with all of the different destinations that are available to that person within that walking catchment. A very cool little feature that Jake has developed for us is a toggle field which will expand the walking catchment according to if the traffic signals were reconfigured to prioritize the person walking, so that if crossing times were prioritized towards the person walking rather than the flow of traffic, what does that walking catchment then expand to? So that it's a really great tool. And the map itself, it's a lot of fun. It's a really great information and education tool around opening people's eyes to what is available within their walking catchment. Often, if somebody has to take a circuitous route to their local shops by car, they might have the perception that the shops are a lot further away than what they actually are if they can get there through cut throughs by walking. And that's the sort of thing that this map will show somebody. So it's also a great tool for behaviour change, but it also links to advocacy resources that we have for community members. So one of our roles at the Heart Foundation, as well as our own advocacy role in communicating with all levels of governments and influencing change through our own advocacy position, we also seek to mobilise community members themselves to advocate for improvements, for walkability, for built environments and heart health. So we've developed a petition, which is a really easy way for a community member to get involved, as well as a community walkability checklist. And that's a tool that a community member can take on their local walking route and do an assessment or audit of how walkable their local neighbourhood is. they will receive a completed PDF, a walkability rating of their area so that they've got an idea of how it compares with other areas' walkability. And they can then provide that to their local council. You asked what are some other key actions that community members can take. And look, because we follow each other on social media, I know that we share this view, Wendy, and it's one that I'm really passionate about and has been a bit of a driving force in why we've developed some of these new community resources, is just the importance of community voice, not only in speaking up when things go wrong, but the importance of communities providing their support and giving license to elected leaders and politicians and decision makers for some of these really positive projects to go ahead. Often we will only speak up when we want to speak out against something, but it is equally, if not more important, to speak up and give support for projects that we want to go ahead, or for something that might have just been implemented and completed in a local neighbourhood. Write to your local council member and say thanks, because it means the next time that they want to implement something similar, they can say, hey, my community is thanking me for this. The community wants more of this. So I can't stress enough the importance of community voice. And I often think about this in terms of the silent supporters, and that we have so many silent supporters across the country. And I often like to think that if only those silent supporters would be a little less silent, we might see a lot more happening to create some really positive change. In that context, the Heart Foundation earlier this year engaged McCrindle Research to undertake a national survey for us. It's a survey that we've undertaken twice previously, and it's called What Australia Wants: Neighbourhood Design. And McCrindle went out to 3,000 people across the country and basically asked questions about physical activity and community sentiment for local neighbourhoods to sort of elicit how important is it to people to be physically active in their local neighbourhoods, and to what extent do local neighbourhoods support and meet those expectations. And encouragingly, we found that 96% of people want to be physically active in their local area, and that one of the top priorities when considering where to live is access to local destinations and neighbourhoods that people can be out and be physically active. We also saw strong support for government to reallocate roads and transport funding into active travel infrastructure, as well as really strong support for reduced speed limits in local neighbourhood environments. There's lots at the community level, and then of course there's also the local actions that community members themselves can take. We don't always need to wait for government to come along and do something. Street libraries are a great example. They can add so much to the local environment. A water bowl for dogs, little things that community members can do that just start to improve the neighbourhood for everyone.
It turns out that when you press the beg button for pedestrian crossings, the quicker that changes, the more walkable the neighbourhood. I saw some amazing research about that this week. It was just absolutely clear that if you just press and you can cross, it means it's no longer a hindrance. And there aren't that many cars, generally speaking, that would make that a problem. I think that's a super quick one that councils can do just on their own. I knew somebody who every time the politician in her father's local area did something good, he would write a letter to say, thank you very much, every single good thing. I did do that recently. We had a politician come up and it was a networking event. And I said, thank you for doing this. And he was really appreciative. It just made a huge difference to him. I said, tell your team. He was super stoked. They're just people and they're trying to do the right thing. You'd be amazed at how human politicians are. That's what really surprised me. And it also really surprised me at how much effect community has on decision making. That's been my biggest surprise.
Absolutely. And that's the power of community voice.
There is a word, you may want to keep this for your own records, called pluralistic ignorance. And this is the idea that you want it done, but you think others don't want it to be different. So you think, I'll just agree with what I think others want. And therefore everybody thinks that everybody else wants this thing that only a very few vocal minority want. But as you say, it's the silent majority who tend to be too silent. that's part of that problem. So if somebody's in council, we've sort of said what they can do. Go to the website, have a look at the resources. Is that right? Anything to add on that one?
Look, engage with local communities and make it easy for communities to give their support.
I'm up to the last question, which is any closing remarks, any final thoughts, anything I should have asked and didn't. I just would love to hear anything else you would like to share with our listener that's important to you about Healthy Active by Design.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug some of our recent and upcoming resources, both for industry and for community. Look, I would encourage all your listeners to please follow Healthy Active by Design as part of the Heart Foundation. And that's where you'll be the first to know about upcoming releases and launches of new materials and ways to engage with us and events and conferences where we might be leading workshops or presenting on some of this material. A huge thanks to the federal government's Department of Health, Disability and Ageing, who fund our walking program at the Heart Foundation. And also a huge thanks to the many people who have been involved with Healthy Active by Design, either internally or externally, for many years and have developed it into the credible, robust program that it is.
And there is a community group for Heart Foundation walkers, I think, as well.
So we have, I think it's 1,200 walking groups across the country. We've got a great website. You can visit our Heart Foundation walking website, put your postcode in, and you'll be able to see all of the walking groups that are in your local area. We also have personal walking plans for people who can't or don't want to join a walking group. This is a solo sort of supported 6-week journey via SMS and email support. That's a really great program. And of course, we still have our long-running Jump Rope for Heart program at the Heart Foundation as well, which is news to some people.
Thank you so much for your time today. And it's so nice to have a good chat with you because we haven't actually had a chat so far. Thank you very much for sharing these amazing resources. I learned tons. So I will be click, 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 click everywhere on the website. Thank you very much.
Oh, look, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on, Wendy. I do really appreciate the opportunity, and likewise, it has been wonderful to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to the Streets and People podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who'd find it helpful. Your small action could make a big difference. We're on all the usual podcasting platforms, so don't miss a single story. To find out what else we do, check out getaroundcaboolture.au. Until next time, remember, there's more than one way to get where you're going. Keep moving, keep listening, and keep imagining streets made for people.